All right, go ahead and take it
Okay,
away.
I just want to welcome everybody. I just want to welcome everybody and say that we didn't really get, I don't think, any questions. So we're going to go over some that we've received. Either we're both on, we have a couple districts in selective review, and some questions have come up during some of the training with OEC. And then we've had a couple questions that may not be, people in this audience may know the answers, but it seems to come repeatedly sometimes, and definitely in this review situation. So at any time, if you have other questions or whatever, please, feel free to unmic yourself and say or put it in the chat. But since there's not that many people here, it's certainly okay to unmute your mic. So we'll just go ahead with what we have planned. Okay, today's topics are 504 questions. We've had some of those, some interesting ones, let's put it that way, recently. Signatures during virtual meetings, which with COVID this year, we know how there are virtual IEP meetings and ETRs, verbal consent, and how is occasional pullout from the general ed classroom documented if co-taught?
Okay, thanks, Helen. So as Helen said, we've gotten a pretty consistent onslaught of questions around 504, specifically about, how it works when you have a non-public in your jurisdiction. And, we get a lot of questions around scholarship and again, yes, Helen? Can everyone hear me?
Dee Dee, you were just kind of like, your voice was kind of like real slow, kind of dragging, but I can still hear you.
Oh, okay. Must be a little bit of a sketchy connection there. Okay, so yeah, so as I was saying, we often have questions from you folks about non-publics in your district, how that affects scholarship, and who's responsible for evaluations and so forth. So a couple of things that have popped up multiple times recently are questions about 504. So when there's a non-public in your jurisdiction and they request a 504, the question is, are you, as the district of service, are you responsible the way you are for an ETR, an evaluation? And the answer to that is kind of twofold. And it's very much like when you have a request for a referral for eval for a kid who's attending a non-public. The answer to that is always, it depends. If the child is already enrolled in the non-public, in the private school, when the referral is made, then it is not, it's not the responsibility of the district of residence, it's on the district of service. But if they have not yet enrolled, it falls back to the district of residence. For a 504, what's interesting is, because it does not fall under IDEA, of course, we know it's under OCR, if there is no suspicion that the child may qualify under IDA, and it is 100% everybody sure we are just looking at a 504, it goes back to the district of residence. From evaluation through FAPE, it falls on the district of residence. However, if there's any question and you think that it could go either way, then of course the district of service is responsible under their child find requirements. So just wanted to clarify that, that again, if it is at all, questionable and you're not sure if the kid's going to qualify under IDEA, then of course it's the district of service. But if everyone agrees that that is not the case, then everything falls back to the district of residence. And then another question we've had a few times is, when a child on a 504 really no longer needs accommodations, or any kind of related service that may be on the 504, can we just exit the student, or do we need to do a reevaluation? And no, you do need to reevaluate just the same as you would for a child on an IEP, because it is a change of placement. When you remove services, that constitutes a change of placement. So you do need to do a reevaluation before doing that. Now, obviously, you guys already know that some of the differences with a 504, you don't necessarily have to have parent agreement. You can go ahead and move forward and notify them through, a PR01, but you still would need to do a reeval. Any questions about that? Okay.
Hello?
All right, Helen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Oh, hi, Well. Hey, I'm in the middle of a meeting. Can I call you back? Okay, thanks, bye.
Once again, I'm muted, sorry. Signature requirements, and we know this has come up quite a bit during COVID, and then also on some of our district reviews, we have a online school going through review. Anyhow, is it permissible to just indicate that the meeting was held via Google or Zoom on the signature section of ETR documents? Well, you certainly can document that you held a meeting via Zoom or Google, but you can't document a signature that way. If you have an initial ETR, you have to have the signature of the parent. And Dee Dee, you jump in here because you're the one that dealt with this the most, with the slip of paper and everything.
Yeah, so, and I know Helen's going to touch on this a little bit with question 4, but just remembering that you do have to have a signature, and just indicating that, something was held virtually is definitely not sufficient. As Helen said, you could document that, but you would still need to have some other type of verification or documentation. And Helen will share that in these next couple of points under number 4.
Okay, and so just getting to that, yeah, like Dee Dee said, you have to have, you can document that it was held that way, but you have to also have more of a discussion. And when it comes to verbal consent being allowable, no, there is no verbal consent. In the case of an ETR, where a informed consent is obtained, there still is no such thing. We have to stress that because this came up quite a bit in one of our reviews about with COVID and everything, with obtaining verbal consent, but there is no such thing. And actually this came up in one of our other districts. Prior to the closing, we had a district going through review that had a hard time reaching parents, and they put verbal consent on the ETR, and naturally they were found non-compliant in that area because there is no verbal consent for ETR. Although, okay, parents can agree verbally with an IEP amendment, and we all know that you don't have to have them sign. They can verbally give you their agreement with an amendment. For an IEP, we know there's no amendments to an ETR. And even though a parent's signature is required for a on the RIP, it is expected that you obtain a signature if at all possible. It's just trying different attempts to get the signature. And I know with having a little discussion prior to this, we were talking a little bit about some of these students that have gone missing, even though you still have an IEP, you can't find the family, you can't find the student. So you have to at least document attempts to contact and have that. And I would say even write a PR01. Of course, you don't have a PR01 if you don't know where the family is. It's no way there, you can't send it, but just document all the different ways you've tried to find the family, because that has become, especially when we're doing reviews. And I'm going to say OEC has been very cognizant of that, but they do want to see documentation that you've tried in different ways to find this student. That even goes into your absentee policy too.
Right.
And Dee Dee, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, thanks, Helen. Like Helen said, in the case where you're trying to track someone down, you're going to use your documentation of attempts. Also, when you're trying to obtain a signature, that was one of the things that we wanted to share, that there are some creative ways to do it. And I'm going to show you this next question was, again, going back to that consent. What about a review of an ETR, a reevaluation, when you don't get a parent response? Can you still test? And this came up, we discussed this with the state at our state work group a few weeks ago, and the answer is a little bit nuanced. So it really depends on what type of non-response we're talking about. So if you have to do new testing and it's not just a record review, and you literally get no response at all, nothing, as in there's not a note, there's not an email, there's not a phone call, a text, there's nothing back from the parent at all. And you've done your, due diligence and recorded and documented your multiple attempts through multiple means. We really want to stress that if you made 3 phone calls, that does not constitute a sufficient documentation of attempts. You should be using multiple methods. And we're not saying that everybody has to get in their car and drive to the home. But what we are saying is, you can't just do 3 phone calls and that be it. You would want to have where you used snail mail, email, phone call, so you just want to show some variety there. But if you get no response at all, you may proceed with new testing. If you get any kind of response, even if it is just a text message and the parent says, yeah, they're going to participate, in the planning and give, consent, even if they don't follow through, but there was any kind of response, you may not proceed with new testing unless you get that signed informed consent. Therefore, you would switch to a record review and you would be limited in being able to do any type of new testing. So again, to clarify, the only time you can go ahead and proceed without that consent is if you truly get crickets back. And then going back to what Helen was talking about earlier about having creative ways to get that signature for whether it's an IEP or an ETR, especially during the pandemic, we do have flexibility. The state is being very flexible in what they will accept as a signature. However, there are a few things that do not constitute a signature. A text message is not acceptable. What you can do is you can have a parent email and say something like, I agree to, the planning and the testing that is going to be done by the district, and just an email. Now, having said that, the reason the email is acceptable is because emails are time and date stamped. We would still want a signature. So there are really easy things that you can do. If you don't have access to, the technology for a family to sign electronically, they can literally sign a piece of scrap paper, take a picture of it on their phone and text it to you. That can be printed as long as it is accompanied by the email. The email is crucial because, again, think about when they're taking a picture of a piece of scrap paper with their name on it, there's no time reference for that. But if you attach that to the email that is time and date stamped, now you've got solid documentation of informed consent, and that is completely acceptable. Now, obviously with the IEP, we would like to see the same thing, but it's not as critical. Obviously for an initial it is, but if it's, a renewal IEP, obviously we all know that, best practice is to have that signature, but you can proceed without it. So if you just had the picture of their signature, it's not the end of the world. Obviously, we always want to try to get those signatures, but we know that we don't always do that. And that doesn't stop us from moving forward with a renewal of an IEP.
Dee Dee, I have a question, and that is, what about the dates for those signatures? Sometimes the document gets toted around from person to person to get
Yes, that's-
signatures.
Great question. We actually just discussed this yesterday
I was
with
just
the
gonna say
monitors.
that.
Yeah, for one of our selective reviews. And again, what you want to make sure is that, you know, you don't have things come up where like, you know, a part 1 testing was done and you see that date being before the parent signed for informed consent. But we understand, the state understands that exactly that document's going to be moving around and sometimes have to, you know, land in someone's lap, you know, days apart from another person. That's okay. What you want to do, what really is going to make that okay, is that you're going to document it in the PRO1. You're going to explain in the PRO1 why everyone wasn't together at the same time, and there are varying dates on the you know, signature section. You're just going to explain that. And again, the only caution to that is, you know, just make sure that you're not putting the cart before the horse and you don't have, you know, evaluators assessing a child before the parent, you know, signed consent. But as long as, you know, you've got your planning form and your consent happen first, then yeah, it's okay that some of those signatures are going to be different, and you just want to make sure you address it. You just call it out and address it in your PRO1.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of what Dee Dee said, this was a big discussion yesterday, and like the monitor said, now you guys aren't being monitored, but when you are under monitoring, they said, you know, when we see this, we see it without any explanation or knowing any background to why these might vary. And they said, if you had just explained, like in a PRO1 or whatever, then we would have known and that would have sufficed. So yeah, I'm so glad that we had that discussion, and that's all there was to it in a sense, you know, just because like the monitor said, we don't know the backstory. We just see the IEP or the ETR.
Helen and Dee, can I ask a question? This is Anne. Okay, I just feel like I don't know why I am so out of this particular loop. We went to so many things, including our psychologist, and you know, went to the legal updates and everything. And in our records, and because we got signatures the best we could, you know, last spring or whatever, but we started the year, with the exception of IETRs and IEPs, for some reason in our head and from the things I went to and both our psychologists, we only during our Zooms, when we get verbal agreement and all of that and everybody's there, we actually have been putting on the participant page attended Zoom if they gave us permission, or agreed Zoom if the parent said that. And we didn't attempt signature after that because we were under the impression that was okay. And just the idea that the psychologist and I both heard the same thing, I don't know why I'm thinking wrong.
So Anne, here's the question. So was that for ETRs as well as IEPs?
This is what our psychologist said that she understood is IETRs, absolutely, we always got signatures, all of that. But for our ETRs, we did accept it through a Zoom and put agree, like on the line, you know, we would put agreed Zoom, and then we checked agree box. And we only did it if like everybody heard and we all, you know, had that documentation. And then we put that documented that way in the PRO1. These people attended, verbal was given in front of everybody. Parent also agreed that we could type this in, and we actually like bring it up. We bring their signature section up, and with our finger or stylus or whatever, we write in agreed at Zoom or attended Zoom. So like if people were remotely other places but were at the meeting.
Well, and here's what I would say. You really tried to go above and beyond in documenting and making sure that there were witnesses for that.
Yes,
I would say
it was okay.
Yeah, I would say you're okay. The only thing I would say to do, and this is what the state is saying, particularly with ETRs, more so than IEPs, But again, best practice is always to try to obtain that signature. I would go ahead and use that as the date that it was completed, but then I would just mail home a hard copy, you know, and it doesn't, obviously you're not going to mail home the original, but I would mail home the signature page and just with a self-addressed stamped envelope and ask the parent to return it with a signature. That way you're completely covered. And again, I think that I'm not saying that you would necessarily get dinged for that. We're just sharing, you know, what has been expressed by OEC, that they really want to see that follow up. It's not that they're doubting that, you know, that took place. But again, thinking about were you to land in some kind of due process situation, we're just not comfortable that that would necessarily hold up in court. That, you know, you would just want to follow through with, and even if that signature date is dated a month later, it's okay because you've got the documentation on the signature page of the, you know, the original document. You verified everything in your PRO1 with the dates that those agreements were given. So even if you snail mail home a copy of the signature page and it doesn't come back for a month and a half, that's okay. It's just important that you're showing that you still went the extra step to get a signature.
And
Yeah,
you're
and
saying, go ahead, Helen.
Go ahead, Ann. No, I was just going to say it's with a IEP and not an initial. It's, you know, I think what you guys are doing, you know, is going above and beyond. And I think you would be fine. I do think, like Dee Dee said, they always like to see if you can, you know, obtain a signature, and if you just sent the signature page home, especially on the ETR. But they also know people have to get creative. Now on a
Right.
initial, you can't. But,
yeah, all initials, we get signatures no matter what.
yeah,
And
and I
even
would
with
say,
the,
and I would
Go
just
ahead,
say,
Helen.
if you have a contentious parent, that's where I'd be really, really cautious. Only because, and OEC kind of said this too. I mean, they kept more or less citing not so much, I mean, they talked about non-compliance, but they just said, we want you to be protected too if you go to a due process. And you know who your contentious parents are.
Okay.
and I was just going to say, and yeah, like Helen said, we know that it can be difficult. So even if it's as like, excuse me, like I said earlier, even if you do the snapshot, you know, where they sign a piece of scrap paper and take a picture, if you could send the parent an email and just get them to reply back that, yes, you know, I got the PR1. If you could just say, thank you for the meeting today. We're just documenting that you were in agreement, you know, with the ETR, and they respond, there you've got your time and date stamp. And then, like I said, you know, send something home for them to sign later, or ask them to send a picture via text message with their signature on a piece of paper. All of those things will work. So again, much more critical for an ETR than the IEP. Obviously, we know that. And I know you guys, like you said, you're doing it for the initials, but even for the reeval, you know, just do what you can. Like I said, what you're writing and what you're doing is great. The state is just strongly standing on, no, they want some kind of signature attached to that. And